Opening hook. I never thought the moment that would change everything between us would happen in the middle of a thunderstorm, with him soaking wet in my doorway at 2 in the morning, looking at me like I was the only person left in the world. His chest was heaving, rain dripping from his hat, and before I could ask what was wrong, he said the 5 words that made my heart stop. I can't do this anymore. The ranch had always been our sanctuary, mine and Carter's, 2 boys who grew up riding horses before we could properly walk, roping cattle before we understood what responsibility meant, and building a friendship so solid that everyone in town just assumed we'd be partners for life. They were right, in a way, just not in the way they thought. Carter Hayes moved to the neighboring ranch when we were both 7 years old. His family bought the old Pritchard place, 1,500 acres of rolling Wyoming grassland that bordered my family's property. I remember the first time I saw him, standing on the fence line with his daddy, both of them wearing matching black Stetsons and dusty boots. Even then, something about him caught my attention. Maybe it was the way he looked at the land, like he was already planning to conquer it. Or maybe it was just the universe whispering that this boy would matter more than anyone else ever could. He became inseparable almost immediately. Our fathers worked together during branding season and roundups, which meant Carter and I spent endless hours together. We learned to rope on the same practice dummy, broke our first horses within weeks of each other, and spent countless nights camping under the stars, talking about everything and nothing. By the time we were teenagers, we weren't just best friends anymore. We were brothers. At least, that's what everyone said. That's what we said too. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. I can't pinpoint the exact moment, can't tell you the specific day when looking at Carter stopped feeling simple and started feeling like standing too close to a fire. It was gradual, like the way seasons change without you noticing, until suddenly the leaves are falling and you're wondering where summer went. One day I was watching him work with a stubborn mare in the training corral, shirt clinging to his back with sweat, and my chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with friendship. One day I was listening to him laugh at something stupid I said, and I wanted to make him laugh like that forever. One day I was lying awake at night thinking about him, and I realized with cold, sinking certainty that what I felt wasn't what best friends were supposed to feel. I was 17 when I understood what it meant. 17 when I had to face the truth that I'd been dancing around for years, and I was terrified. This was Wyoming. This was ranch country. This was a world of tradition and expectation, where men were supposed to be a certain way, love a certain way, live a certain way. I'd grown up hearing the jokes, the casual cruelty disguised as humor. I'd seen how people looked at anyone who was different. And Carter was my best friend. My partner, my entire world. The thought of losing him because of feelings I couldn't control was unbearable. So I buried it deep. I learned to school my expressions when he stood too close. I learned to laugh off the moments when our hands brushed. I learned to act normal when he'd throw his arm around my shoulders or fall asleep against me during long truck rides. I became an expert at pretending everything was fine while my heart was quietly tearing itself apart. We graduated high school together, both of us skipping college to work our family ranches full-time. It made sense. This was our legacy, our future. We were going to be the next generation of Hayes and Morrison ranchers, continuing what our fathers and grandfathers had built. We even started talking about eventually combining operations, really becoming partners in every official sense. It should have been perfect. It should have been everything I wanted. But every day felt like walking a tightrope. Every conversation was a careful dance. Every moment alone with him was both the best and worst part of my day. I was 23 years old, running a successful cattle operation, respected in my community, and absolutely miserable in a way I couldn't explain to anyone, especially not to the person causing it. Carter, for his part, seemed completely oblivious. He dated occasionally, casual relationships with girls from town that never seemed to go anywhere serious. He'd tell me about them sometimes, asking for advice I had no business giving, and I'd force myself to smile and nod and pretend like every word wasn't a knife twisting deeper. He never seemed to notice how quiet I got during those conversations or how quickly I'd changed the subject. Or maybe he did notice, and he was just kind enough not to mention it. The summer I turned 24 was brutally hot. Wyoming summers could be unforgiving, but that year felt especially cruel. The grass turned brown early, Water sources dried up faster than usual, and we spent long, exhausting days moving cattle to better grazing and reinforcing fence lines. Carter and I worked side by side almost every day, just like we always had. And just like always, I pretended everything was fine. It was mid-July when his father had the heart attack. Massive, sudden, devastating. One moment Tom Hayes was walking out to the barn, the next he was on the ground. Carter found him. I heard the panic in his voice over the phone, dropped everything, and drove to their place faster than I'd ever driven anything in my life. By the time I got there, the ambulance was already pulling away, sirens wailing, and Carter was standing in the driveway looking absolutely shattered. I didn't think, I just got out of my truck and pulled him into my arms. He didn't resist. He just collapsed against me, shaking, and I held him while his whole world fell apart. His mother rode in the ambulance with his father, so I drove Carter to the hospital, stayed with him through the endless waiting, held his hand when the doctor came out to tell us that Tom had made it through surgery, but the next 48 hours were critical. Those 2 days felt like a lifetime. Carter's mother practically lived at the hospital, so Carter stayed at my place. He couldn't stand being alone in his family's house, couldn't bear the silence. I understood. We didn't talk much. We just existed together. He'd sit on my porch staring at nothing while I made food he barely ate. He'd lie awake in my guest room while I pretended not to hear him crying through the walls. And when he couldn't sleep at all, I'd sit up with him, both of us nursing coffee at 3 in the morning, watching the sun slowly rise over the ranch. On the second night, Tom's condition stabilized. The doctor said he'd make it, though recovery would be long and he'd never be able to work the ranch the way he used to. Carter broke down in relief, and this time when I held him, something felt different. The way his hands gripped my shirt, the way he pressed his face against my shoulder, the way he whispered, "Thank you," like I'd done something more than just be there. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were red and exhausted, and he looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. For a moment, something hung in the air between us, something heavy and undefined. Then his mother called with another update, and the moment shattered like glass. Things changed after that, though neither of us acknowledged it out loud. Carter was different, quieter, more thoughtful. He spent more time than ever at my place, even after his father came home from the hospital. He'd show up at odd hours, sometimes with a six-pack of beer, sometimes with nothing at all, and we'd just sit together, talking or not talking. It didn't matter. The silence between us felt weighted now, pregnant with all the things we weren't saying. His father's heart attack had shaken him. I could see it in everything he did. He moved through the world differently now, like someone who'd suddenly realized how fragile everything was. He looked at me differently too, though I couldn't name how exactly. Longer, softer, like he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't know existed. I told myself I was imagining it, that the stress of the situation was making me see things that weren't there, that I was projecting my own feelings onto him because I wanted so desperately for them to be mutual. But then there were moments that felt impossible to explain away. Like the evening in early August when we were fixing a water trough on the far edge of my property. It was late, the sun hanging low and turning everything golden, and we'd been working in comfortable silence for over an hour. I was tightening a bolt when I felt him staring. I looked up, and sure enough, his eyes were fixed on me with that same unreadable expression. When I caught him looking, he didn't glance away like people normally do when they're caught staring. He just held my gaze, and for several long heartbeats, neither of us moved. The air felt thick, electric. Then he cleared his throat, looked away, and went back to work without saying a word. Or the night we went into town for drinks with some of the other ranchers. It was supposed to be a casual evening, blowing off steam after a hard week's work. But Carter stuck close to me all night, closer than necessary. When Sarah Mitchell, a pretty blonde who'd been sweet on him since high school, tried to flirt with him, he was polite but distant. At one point, she suggested they go play pool together, and he declined with a quick, "I'm here with Jake tonight," that made something flutter dangerously in my chest. She looked confused. I felt confused too, but Carter just took another sip of his beer and started telling me a story about a calf he'd pulled that morning, like nothing unusual had happened. These moments were piling up, creating a tension between us that felt like a rubber band stretched to its breaking point. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know if it meant anything at all, but it was driving me slowly insane. Late August brought a livestock auction in Cheyenne, and both Carter and I needed to pick up some new breeding stock. We decided to make a weekend of it, get a hotel, handle our business, maybe see a movie or something. Normal friend stuff. Except nothing about how I felt was normal anymore, and the thought of spending 2 days in close quarters with him was both thrilling and terrifying. The drive down was easy, 3 hours of familiar roads and comfortable conversation. We talked about ranch business, upcoming fall work, whether we should try to organize another joint branding session with our families, normal things, safe things, but I was acutely aware of every moment. The way his hands looked on the steering wheel, the sound of his laugh when I told a stupid joke, the way the late afternoon sunlight caught the amber flecks in his brown eyes. I was so desperately in love with him that it physically hurt, and I had absolutely no idea what to do about it. The auction went fine. We both got what we needed, made some good deals, and ran into several other ranchers we knew. Afterward, we grabbed dinner at a steakhouse, then headed back to the hotel. We'd gotten a room with 2 beds to save money, something we'd done dozens of times before on various trips. It had never been a problem. But that night, as I lay in the darkness listening to his breathing from the bed 6 feet away, it felt like the most excruciating form of torture. Around midnight, I heard him shift. "Jake, you awake?" "Yeah," I said quietly. Silence for a moment, then, "Can I ask you something?" My heart started pounding. "Sure." Another long pause. I could practically hear him thinking, choosing his words carefully. Finally, he said, "Have you ever felt like everyone expects you to be a certain way? Like there's this path everyone assumes you'll take, and you don't know how to tell them you might want something different?" I stared at the ceiling, my mouth suddenly dry. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," he said, and I could hear the frustration in his voice. Lately I've been thinking about my life, about what I want, about things." "Things," I prompted, barely breathing. He was quiet for so long I thought he might have fallen asleep. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, "About what makes me happy." I didn't know what to say. I couldn't risk asking what he meant, couldn't risk pushing too hard and shattering whatever fragile thing was happening in this moment. So I just said, "You should do whatever makes you happy, Carter. Life's too short to live for other people's expectations." "Is that what you do?" he asked. "Are you happy?" The question felt like a trap, a test, but also like an opening, a door cracking just slightly. "I don't know," I admitted. "Are any of us really happy?" "That's a depressing answer." "It's an honest one." He laughed, soft and sad. "Yeah, I guess it is." We didn't talk after that. Eventually, I heard his breathing even out into sleep, but I stayed awake for hours, replaying the conversation, trying to decode it, wondering if I'd imagined the weight behind his words. September came with cooler temperatures and the back-breaking work of fall roundup. Both our operations were moving cattle from summer pastures, sorting, weaning calves, preparing for winter. It was the busiest time of year, which meant Carter and I were together constantly, working from sunup to sundown, our hands bloodied and our bodies exhausted. There wasn't time to think. There wasn't energy to feel. There was only the work. But the tension didn't go away. If anything, it intensified. Every accidental touch felt charged. Every shared look lasted a beat too long. We were like two storm systems circling each other, creating pressure that had to break eventually. The break came on a Tuesday evening in late September. We'd finished moving the last of the cattle, and Carter's mother had invited my family over for dinner to celebrate the end of Roundup. It was a tradition, alternating years between our families. My parents drove over, and we all gathered in the Hayes' big farmhouse kitchen, eating too much and laughing at old stories. I watched Carter across the table, illuminated by the warm light of the fixtures overhead, looking more relaxed than he had in weeks. He caught me staring at one point, and instead of looking away, he just smiled. Not a big smile, just a small, private thing that felt like it was only for me. My mother asked me a question right then, breaking the moment, but my heart was racing for the rest of the meal. After dinner, while our parents settled in the living room with coffee and dessert, Carter asked if I wanted to check on a few horses in the barn. I knew it was an excuse. There was nothing that needed checking, but I said yes anyway. The barn was quiet and dim, lit only by a few scattered bulbs. The horses nickered softly as we passed their stalls. Carter walked slowly, not really going anywhere in particular, and I followed. We ended up in the tack room, surrounded by the smell of leather and hay, and he finally stopped, turning to face me. "I need to tell you something," he said. His voice was shaking slightly. My heart felt like it might break through my ribs. "Okay." He took a breath, looked down at his boots, then back up at me. "I've been trying to figure out how to say this for months, maybe longer, and I keep chickening out because I'm scared of what it might mean, of what you might think, of how it might change things between us." "Carter," I started, but he held up a hand. "Me get this out before I lose my nerve." He took another breath. "My whole life, I've known exactly who I was supposed to be. Tom Hayes' son, a rancher, a good man who'd marry a nice girl and have kids and carry on the family legacy. And I never questioned it because that was just what you did. But then my dad almost died, and I realized that life is so much shorter than we think it is, and spending it being who everyone else expects instead of who you actually are is a waste." He paused, and I couldn't breathe. "Jake, he ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling. "I don't know how to explain this. I don't even fully understand it myself. But when I think about my future, when I think about what I want my life to look like, the only constant is you. It's always been you. And I don't think that's just friendship anymore. I don't think it has been for a long time." The world tilted. Everything I'd imagined, hoped for, dreamed about in my most secret moments was suddenly real. Carter was standing 3 feet away from me, looking terrified and brave and vulnerable, and he just said the thing I'd never allowed myself to believe could be true. "Say something," he whispered. "Please, even if it's to tell me I'm crazy and I've just ruined everything." I couldn't form words. My brain had short-circuited. So instead of speaking, I closed the distance between us in 2 steps and did the only thing that made sense. I kissed him. It wasn't smooth or practiced. It was desperate and clumsy and perfect. His breath caught in surprise, but then his hands came up to grip my shirt, pulling me closer, and suddenly we were both falling into something we'd been circling for years. He tasted like coffee and hope, and when he made a small sound in the back of his throat, I thought I might actually die from the sheer intensity of feeling. We broke apart after a moment, both breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. "I've wanted to do that for 6 years, I admitted, my voice rough. 6 years, he pulled back just enough to look at me, his eyes wide. "Why the hell didn't you?" "I was scared, I thought. I didn't think you could possibly feel the same way. Jake, I've been losing my mind over you for at least 2 years. I just didn't know what it meant until recently. Didn't let myself think about what it meant." 2 years, I repeated, almost laughing at the absurdity. "We've both been complete idiots." "Speak for yourself," he said, but he was smiling, and then he was kissing me again, and nothing had ever felt more right in my entire life. We stayed in that tack room for a long time, alternating between kissing and talking, piecing together the history of our feelings like archaeologists discovering something ancient and precious. He told me about the moment he'd realized his feelings had shifted, watching me work with a difficult horse, and suddenly understanding that what he felt was so much more than friendship. I told him about being 17 and terrified. We laughed at all the moments we'd both been desperately trying to act normal while falling apart inside. We marveled at how oblivious we'd both been to each other's feelings. Eventually, we had to go back to the house before our parents got suspicious. We emerged from the barn looking probably too flushed and happy, but no one seemed to notice. The rest of the evening passed in a surreal haze. I couldn't stop looking at Carter. He kept finding excuses to brush past me, brief touches that now meant everything. When our families finally called it a night and my parents headed home, Carter walked me to my truck. "So," he said, leaning against the driver's door, effectively trapping me, "what happens now? What do you want to happen?" "Everything," he said simply. "I want everything with you, but I also know this is complicated. This is Wyoming. This is our families, our community. We can't just." "I know," I said, "but Carter, I've spent 6 years pretending I don't feel this way. I'm not doing that anymore. We'll figure out the rest as we go." He smiled, soft and genuine. "Together." "Together," I confirmed. He kissed me once more, sweet and lingering, then let me get in my truck. I drove home feeling like I was floating, like the entire world had been repainted in brighter colors. Carter Hayes loved me. The thought played on repeat in my mind, a mantra of disbelief and joy. The next few weeks were the happiest of my life. We were careful. We weren't ready to tell anyone yet, weren't ready to deal with the questions and the judgment we knew would come. So we kept things the same on the surface, best friends and ranching partners, while in private, we explored this new territory together. We stole moments whenever we could, late nights when everyone else was asleep, early mornings before the ranch work started, long rides checking fence lines where no one would see us. Every touch felt revolutionary. Every kiss felt like coming home. We learned each other in ways we'd never let ourselves before, discovering that the friendship we'd built over 17 years was an incredibly solid foundation for something deeper. But keeping it secret was harder than I'd anticipated. Every time someone made a casual joke about when Carter would settle down with a nice girl, I had to bite my tongue. Every time my mother asked why I wasn't dating anyone, I had to lie. Every time we were in public and I wanted to reach for his hand or stand closer or just look at him the way I wanted to look at him, I had to suppress it. Carter handled it better than I did. He'd had more practice hiding his feelings, I supposed, or maybe he was just more patient, but I could see the toll it was taking on him too. The careful distance he'd maintain when others were around, even though I knew he wanted to be closer. The way he'd deflect questions about his love life with practiced ease. The moments when I'd catch a look of frustration or longing cross his face before he schooled it away. We talked about coming out, about telling our families, about being open. But every time we started that conversation, one of us would bring up a reason to wait, just a little longer. After fall work was done, after the holidays, after winter, there was always a reason to keep waiting, to keep hiding. Holidays were particularly brutal. Thanksgiving and Christmas meant constant family gatherings, huge meals where both our families came together, and hours of having to pretend Carter was just my best friend and nothing more. On Christmas Eve, our families did a gift exchange at my parents' house. Carter gave me a new saddle blanket in front of everyone, something nice but generic. But later, when we snuck away to my truck for a few minutes of privacy, he gave me a different gift. A pocket knife, custom made, with my initials engraved on one side and his on the other, hidden on the underside of the handle, where only I would know to look. "So I'm always with you," he said quietly, "even when I can't actually be." I kissed him in the dark cab of my truck, surrounded by Wyoming winter cold and Christmas lights from the house, and wondered how much longer we could keep living like this. The answer came in February, and it wasn't gentle. I was in town picking up supplies when I ran into Drew Carpenter, someone we'd gone to school with. Drew had always been friendly, one of those guys who knew everyone and never seemed to have a care in the world. He was standing outside the feed store with a couple other guys, and when he saw me, he waved me over. "Jake, haven't seen you in forever, man. How's the ranch?" "Good," I said, stopping to chat. "Busy, you know how it is." "Yeah, I bet. Hey, speaking of which, you and Carter Hayes are still attached at the hip, right?" Something in his tone made me tense. "We're business partners and friends, yeah, why?" Drew exchanged a look with the other guys that I didn't like. "No reason, it's just, well, Sarah Mitchell's been asking about him again. She wanted to know if he was seeing anyone. I told her I didn't think so, but I figured I'd check with you first, since you'd know better than anyone." "He's not interested in Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Really, that's too bad. She's had it bad for him forever," Drew grinned. "Unless there's someone else. Come on, you can tell us, who's the lucky girl?" "There's no girl," I said flatly. "Damn, well, maybe he just needs the right person to come along. He can't stay single forever, right? You neither, for that matter. You're both getting up there. Don't you want to settle down, have some kids, all that?" I wanted to punch him, not because he was being cruel, he wasn't, not really. He was just making conversation, asking the same questions everyone asked. But in that moment, standing there while this guy casually discussed my and Carter's love lives like they were spectator sports, something inside me snapped. I was so tired of hiding, so tired of pretending, so tired of living a half-life where the most important relationship I had was something I couldn't acknowledge. I have to go, I said abruptly, cutting Drew off mid-sentence. I loaded my supplies and drove home in a haze of anger and frustration. That evening, Carter came over like he often did. The moment he walked in, he could tell something was wrong. What happened? I told him about the conversation with Drew, about the casual invasiveness of it, about how much I hated having to dodge and deflect. I'm tired of this, I finished. I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of pretending you're just my friend when you're so much more than that. Carter's expression was complicated. I know I'm tired of it too, but Jake, you know what coming out would mean. The looks, the questions, the judgment. Hell, we don't even know if our families would accept it. So what? We just keep lying forever. That's not fair. None of this is fair. I was packing now, agitated. I spent 6 years hiding my feelings from you. Now I've got you, and I still have to hide. When does it end? I don't know, he said, and he sounded tired. I don't have answers, Jake. I just know that this is complicated and scary, and I need time to figure out how to handle it. How much time? I don't know that either. We argued for an hour, not really getting anywhere, both of us frustrated and hurt and scared. Finally, Carter left, and for the first time since we'd gotten together, he didn't kiss me goodbye. Over the next few weeks, things between us became strained. We still saw each other almost every day. Our ranches were too connected, our work too intertwined to avoid each other, but something had shifted. The easy comfort we'd always shared felt forced. Conversations that used to flow naturally became stilted and awkward. We were both trying too hard, both aware that something was broken and neither of us knowing how to fix it. The tension came to a head on a miserable March evening. We'd spent the day helping Carter's father with some equipment repairs. And by the time we finished, we were both exhausted and cranky. We'd barely spoken to each other all day, communicating mostly through looks and gestures, and the silence had grown heavier with each passing hour. As we were loading tools back into my truck, Carter's mother called out from the house, asking Carter if he'd be home for dinner. He called back that he would be, and something about that simple exchange made me snap. "You're always home for dinner lately," I said, more sharply than intended. He looked at me confused. So you used to spend most evenings at my place. Now you barely come over." "I've been busy." "You're not busy, you're avoiding me." His jaw tightened. "Don't start this here, Jake." "Why not? It's not like we can talk about it anywhere else. Can't talk about it in public. Can't talk about it in front of our families. We can barely talk about it when we're alone anymore because every conversation turns into a fight. Because you keep pushing," his voice rose, frustration finally breaking through. "You keep wanting me to be ready for something I'm not ready for yet. You want me to come out, to tell everyone, to risk everything, and I'm not there yet. Why can't you understand that?" "Because I love you," the words erupted out of me, louder than intended, and Carter froze. It was the first time either of us had said it out loud, and the weight of it hung in the air between us. His expression crumbled. "Jake." "No, you know what? Forget it." I was already getting in my truck, my hands shaking. "I'm not doing this right now." "Jake, wait." But I was already pulling away, leaving him standing in his family's driveway looking stricken. I drove home with my heart pounding, replaying the argument in my head, wondering how we'd gotten here. How we'd gone from the happiest I'd ever been to this painful mess in just a few months. I didn't hear from Carter that night, or the next day, or the day after that. At first I told myself he just needed space. We both did. We'd said things in anger that we needed time to process. But as days turned into a week, and a week turned into 2, the silence became deafening. We still saw each other occasionally, our properties shared a border, and sometimes work required us to cross paths, but Carter would offer a tight nod and keep moving. No conversations, no texts, nothing. I was miserable, angry at him for pulling away, angry at myself for pushing too hard, angry at the world for making something that should be simple so impossibly complicated. My parents noticed my mood, but chalked it up to stress. How could I explain that I was heartbroken over someone I'd never officially been with, at least not in any way they knew about? 3 weeks after our fight, Carter's mother called my mother to invite our family over for Easter dinner. It was tradition, something we'd done for years. My mother accepted happily, oblivious to the fact that the last person I wanted to see right now was Carter Hayes. But I went, of course I went, because avoiding him forever wasn't an option, and maybe, somewhere deep down, I hoped that being forced together would break this awful stalemate. Easter Sunday arrived cold and overcast, threatening rain. I helped my mother load dishes into the car, plastered on a fake smile, and drove to the Hayes Ranch with a knot in my stomach. Carter's truck was already in the driveway when we arrived. I took a deep breath and followed my parents inside. The house was full of people and noise and the smell of ham cooking. Carter was in the living room talking to his father, and when our eyes met across the room, the pain in his expression was visceral. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. I probably looked the same. Dinner was torture. We were seated across from each other, forced to make small talk and pretend everything was normal while our parents chatted happily around us. Every time I looked up, he was looking away. Every time I tried to catch his eye, he found somewhere else to focus. It felt like the final confirmation that whatever we'd had was over. Done. Ruined by my impatience and his fear and the impossible situation we'd tried to navigate. After dinner, while everyone else was having coffee and pie in the living room, I escaped to the porch. I needed air, space, a moment to compose myself before I had to go back in there and keep pretending my heart wasn't shattering. I was leaning against the porch railing, staring out at the darkening sky, when I heard the screen door open behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know it was Carter. We stood in silence for a long moment. Then quietly he said, "I've missed you." My throat tightened. "Yeah, me too. Jake, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for shutting you out, for handling everything so badly, for—" "Stop," I said, finally turning to face him. "I'm sorry too. I shouldn't have pushed you. I shouldn't have given you an ultimatum when I knew you weren't ready. This whole thing is my fault." "It's not your fault. None of this is anyone's fault. It's just hard." He took a step closer. "But losing you is harder. These last few weeks have been the worst of my life. I can't do this. I can't be without you." "Then what do we do?" I asked helplessly. "Because I can't keep living in limbo either. I can't keep hiding something this important." He was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he took a deep breath, and I saw resolution settle over his features. "You're right. You've been right all along. I've been a coward." "Carter." "No, I have been. I've been so scared of what people will think, of disappointing my family, of changing how people see me. But you know what I'm more scared of? Losing you, not living honestly, wasting my life being someone I'm not just because it's easier." My heart was pounding. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to tell them, my family, your family, everyone. I want to stop hiding." He stepped closer, close enough to touch if I reached out. "I love you, Jake Morrison. I should have said it weeks ago. I should have said it the first night in the barn. I love you, and I don't want to hide that anymore." I was across the distance between us before I consciously decided to move, pulling him into my arms, and he held on just as tightly. We stood there on his family's porch, in full view of anyone who might look out the window, and I didn't care. Nothing had ever felt more right. "We'll tell them tonight," I said into his shoulder. "Together." "Together," he agreed. We held each other for another minute, gathering courage, then pulled apart. Carter's hand found mine, fingers interlocking, and we walked back into the house side by side. Both our families were in the living room, spread out on various couches and chairs, laughing at some story Carter's uncle was telling. They looked up as we entered, and the laughter gradually died as they registered us standing there, holding hands, matching nervous but determined expressions on our faces. Carter's mother was the first to speak. "Boys, is everything all right?" I looked at Carter, he looked at me. Then he took a deep breath and said, "Mom, Dad, everyone, Jake and I have something we need to tell you." The next few hours were a blur, shock, questions, tears, some happy, some confused, some hurt. Carter's father was quiet at first, processing, but eventually pulled Carter into a hug that said more than words could. My mother cried but hugged us both. My father needed time, taking a walk outside before coming back in to shake Carter's hand stiffly and tell us he'd need time to adjust, but that I was still his son. Not everyone reacted well. Carter's uncle left early, clearly uncomfortable. A few other extended family members had questions that bordered on accusatory, but the core of both our families, our parents, our siblings, stayed. They asked questions, they listened, they tried to understand. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale where everyone immediately accepted us with open arms and rose petals, but it was honest, it was real, and as I sat there with Carter's hand in mine, answering questions and explaining our relationship, I felt lighter than I had in months. Years, maybe. We left the Hayes Ranch late that night, both emotionally exhausted but relieved. As we stood by my truck, Carter pulled me close and kissed me, soft and sweet, right there where anyone could see. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For being patient with me, for not giving up, for loving me enough to push when I needed pushing. Always, I promised." The weeks and months that followed weren't easy. Word spread through our small town quickly and reactions were mixed. Some people were supportive, others were coldly distant. A few were outright hostile. We lost some friends, we gained others. Business continued as usual with most of the other ranchers, though there were some who stopped doing business with us entirely. But through it all, we had each other. No more hiding, no more pretending. We worked our ranches side by side during the day and went home together at night. We held hands in public. We navigated the stares and the whispers together, supporting each other through the difficult moments and celebrating the victories. By summer, things had started to settle. People got used to seeing us together. The novelty wore off. Life went on. Our families came around more and more, and by the time Carter's birthday rolled around in July, both sets of parents threw us a joint party, complete with both our names on the cake. We were standing outside that evening, watching the sun set over the land we both loved, when Carter turned to me with a smile. "You know what I realized," he said. "What's that?" "I'm happy, actually genuinely happy. For the first time in my life, I'm not pretending to be anything I'm not. I'm just me with you, and it's everything I never knew I needed." I pulled him close, kissed his temple, and watched the Wyoming sky turn brilliant shades of orange and pink. "Me too," I said simply. Our story wasn't traditional. It wasn't always easy, but it was ours, built on 17 years of friendship and a love that had been there all along, just waiting for us to be brave enough to claim it. And as Carter leaned into me, his hand finding mine like it was the most natural thing in the world, I knew that every difficult moment, every fight, every tear and fear and doubt had been worth it. Because this, standing here with him, living honestly, loving openly, this was what happiness felt like. The ranch, the land, our legacy, none of it meant anything without someone to share it with. And I had found that someone in the person who had been by my side since we were 7 years old. My best friend, my partner, my home. Carter Hayes and I were going to build a life together. Not in secret, not in shame, but out in the open for everyone to see. And whatever challenges came our way, we would face them the same way we'd faced everything else in our lives. Together. 2 years later. The summer we turned 26 was the summer we officially combined our ranches. Hayes Morrison Cattle Company, the sign read, erected at the end of the long driveway that now connected both properties. Our fathers helped us install it, a moment of pride and acceptance that made my throat tight with emotion. Carter and I had built a house on the border between our original properties, right where the fence line used to divide us. It was a simple, sturdy ranch house with a wraparound porch and a view of the mountains in the distance. Every morning we'd stand on that porch with coffee, watching the sunrise over land that was now truly ours, together. Town had mostly settled into acceptance. We weren't the scandal we'd been 2 years ago. We were just Jake and Carter, the ranchers who ran the combined operation. People still had their opinions, of course, but we'd found our community, the people who mattered, who loved and accepted us. The rest didn't matter much anymore. Our families came for Sunday dinners frequently, both sets of parents now comfortable in our home. treating it like any other normal part of their lives. Carter's father had made a full recovery from his heart attack, and though he'd stepped back from the heavy ranch work, he still consulted on major decisions. My father, who'd struggled the most with our relationship initially, now bragged about our successful operation to anyone who would listen. We'd faced challenges. There had been difficult moments, painful conversations, losses of relationships we'd thought were stronger than they turned out to be. But there had also been incredible moments of joy and acceptance, friends who stood by us, community members who went out of their way to show support, and each other, always each other. It was late July, right around sunset, when Carter found me in the barn. I was checking on a mare who was due to foal any day, and I heard his boots on the concrete floor before I saw him. "Hey," he said, coming to stand beside me at the stall door. "Hey yourself." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the mare doze peacefully. Then Carter reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. My heart immediately started racing. "Jake Morrison," he said, turning to face me fully, "I've known you for 19 years. You've been my best friend, my partner, my home, and I don't want to spend another day without making sure you know that I'm in this forever." So, he opened the box, revealing 2 simple silver bands. "Marry me." I couldn't speak, could barely breathe, could only stare at him, at this man I'd loved for so long, who was offering me forever. "Yes," I finally managed, my voice rough with emotion. "Yes, absolutely yes." He laughed, bright and joyful, and pulled me into a kiss that tasted like happiness and promise and home. When we broke apart, he slipped one of the rings onto my finger, and I did the same for him. They were simple, practical, perfect, just like us. "I love you," he said, pressing his forehead to mine. "I love you too, always have, always will." We stood there in the barn where so much of our story had unfolded, holding each other as the last rays of sunlight streamed through the windows, painting everything golden. Outside, the ranch spread out in all directions, our legacy and our future intertwined. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be completely, utterly, perfectly content. This was our life, our land, our love story. And it was only just beginning. The end. Belle, did this story touch your heart? Please like this video and subscribe for more deep, emotional gay love stories. Speech balloon comment below. Should I tell you about Jake and Carter's wedding? What challenges did they face when they got engaged? Do you want part 2? Rainbow, thank you for supporting LGBTQ+ stories that celebrate authentic love. Your support means the world.